As global outrage intensified following Israel's targeted strikes on Hamas leaders in both Qatar and Gaza, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio have presented a steadfast and united front, defying escalating international pressure and widespread calls for an immediate ceasefire. Both leaders emphatically reaffirmed their unwavering primary objective, the complete elimination of Hamas and the unconditional release of all hostages. This resolute stance, captured in a recent public appearance, underscores the deep strategic alignment between Israel and the United States in a volatile and increasingly divided Middle East. The continuation of these aggressive military operations, despite the severe humanitarian consequences and global condemnation, signals a firm commitment from both nations to their stated goals, even at the cost of further diplomatic isolation and increased regional instability. The joint reaffirmation of their objectives by two key figures in this conflict sends a clear message to both allies and adversaries that neither Israel nor its primary backer, the United States, intend to deviate from their current course of action. This persistent defiance of international opinion highlights the profound complexity of the conflict, where national security imperatives, perceived existential threats, and deeply entrenched political positions continue to override widespread humanitarian concerns and diplomatic appeals for a cessation of hostilities. The global outrage stems from several key factors, primarily the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the perceived escalation of Israeli military operations into new territories. The significant civilian casualties, widespread displacement, severe shortage of food, water, and medical supplies in Gaza have generated immense international condemnation. Each new strikes, particularly those targeting areas where civilians are sheltering, or those conducted against high-profile political figures in neutral territories like Qatar, fuels further indignation. The strikes on Hamas leaders in Qatar represents a particularly contentious escalation, targeting individuals in a sovereign nation that has traditionally played a mediating role in regional conflicts is seen by many as a dangerous precedent, potentially undermining diplomatic efforts and broadening the scope of the conflict. It also raises questions about international law and the sovereignty of nations that host political figures involved in ongoing conflicts. Even if those figures are deemed leaders of a designated terrorist organization by Israel and the U.S., the global community, including many of Israel's traditional allies, has expressed profound concerns that these actions are pushing the region closer to a wider conflagration, with unpredictable and potentially catastrophic consequences for international peace and security. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's unwavering resolve to eliminate Hamas has been a consistent cornerstone of his government's war strategy. From his perspective, Hamas represents an existential threat to Israel, not only due to its past attack, but also its stated ideology and continued capacity to inflict violence. The elimination of Hamas is therefore framed as a non-negotiable national security imperative. This objective encompasses dismantling the group's military capabilities, destroying its command and control structure, and eradicating its political influence in Gaza. Netanyahu has repeatedly articulated that a ceasefire without achieving these goals would be a victory for Hamas and would only set the stage for future attacks. This stance resonates deeply with a significant portion of the Israeli public, who remain traumatized by the initial attacks and are determined to see Hamas completely neutralized. The Prime Minister views the global pressure for a ceasefire as an attempt to prematurely end a necessary campaign, which he believes would leave Israel vulnerable. His commitment to this objective is not merely a tactical decision, but is rooted in a broader strategic vision for Israel's long-term security in a hostile region. Echoing Netanyahu's strong stance, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has consistently articulated the United States' firm support for Israel's right to defend itself and its objective of eliminating Hamas. This alignment reflects a long-standing strategic alliance and shared security interests between the two nations. Rubio's reaffirmation signals that under President Donald Trump's administration, the U.S. will continue to provide unwavering diplomatic, military, and financial support to Israel, largely disregarding international criticism of its military action. The U.S. also designated Hamas as a terrorist organization and shares Israel's view that the group must be neutralized to ensure regional stability. Secretary Rubio's statement often emphasized the need to dismantle the capabilities of organizations like Hamas that threaten democratic allies and contribute to terrorism. His public stance indicates that the U.S. prioritized the security concerns of Israel above the growing international outcry for a ceasefire, particularly given the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. This strong show of support provides Israel with critical diplomatic cover on the international stage, enabling it to continue its operation despite significant global pressure and isolation from many other countries and international bodies. The second core objective, shared by both leaders, is the unconditional release of all hostages held by Hamas. This is an intensely emotional and politically charged issue for Israel. The fate of the hostage, including civilians and military personnel, remains a top national priority. Netanyahu's government is under immense domestic pressure to secure their release, and this objective is often linked directly to the ongoing military campaign. The term unconditional release implies that Israel and the U.S. are not prepared to make significant concessions or engage in protracted negotiations that might involve trading prisoners or altering the military campaign's objectives. From their perspective, any concessions could be seen as legitimizing Hamas and encouraging future hostage-taking. Secretary Rubio's emphasis on this point underscores the U.S. shared humanitarian concern for the hostage, some of whom may be dual nationals. The demand for an unconditional release is a clear message to Hamas that they will not be able to leverage the hostage for political or military gains, further cementing the resolve of both nations to achieve this outcome through sustained pressure, including military operations. The joint appearance and unified message from Netanyahu and Rubio are strategically important for several reasons. Firstly, they project an image of strength and unwavering resolve, aiming to deter Hamas and its allies from escalating the conflict further. Secondly, they reassure domestic audience in both Israel and the U.S. that their government are fully committed to achieving their state objective. For Netanyahu, this helps to bolster his political standing amidst intense domestic scrutiny and criticism. For Rubio, it reinforced the Trump administration's pro-Israel foreign policy. Thirdly, it sends a clear signal to the international community, particularly those calling for an immediate ceasefire, that their appeals are being noted but will not alter the fundamental strategic direction of the campaign. This united front is designed to mitigate diplomatic pressure and maintain a coherent narrative in the face of widespread global condemnation. The visible solidarity between the two leaders reinforced the perception that the U.S. will continue to be Israel's most steadfast ally, providing critical backing for its security operations despite the human cost and geopolitical fallout. The dismissal of calls for a ceasefire by both leaders highlights a significant divergence between their strategic imperative and the growing international humanitarian consensus. Many international organizations, the United Nations, and numerous countries have called for an immediate ceasefire to alleviate the suffering of civilians in Gaza and to facilitate the delivery of desperately needed humanitarian aid. These calls are often rooted in concerns about violations of international humanitarian law, the protection of civilians, and the urgent need for a cessation of hostilities to prevent further loss of life. However, Netanyahu and Rubio's rejection of a ceasefire at this juncture suggests that they believe it would undermine their ability to achieve their core objectives of eliminating Hamas and securing hostage release. From their perspective, a premature ceasefire could allow Hamas to regroup, rearm, and continue to pose a threat, negating the gains made by the military campaign. This stark refusal underscored the deep chasm between the warring parties' objectives and the broader international appeals for peace and humanitarian relief, making the path to de-escalation exceptionally difficult. The disregard for such widespread appeal may further isolate Israel and the U.S. diplomatically, potentially impacting their standing in multilateral forums and their relationships with other key global actors who prioritize humanitarian concerns. The regional context in which these actions are unfolding is extremely volatile. The Middle East is already a region fraught with complex geopolitical rivalries, proxy conflicts, and sectarian tensions. Israel's strikes on Hamas leaders, particularly those in Qatar, risk drawing in other regional actors and further destabilizing an already fragile environment. Countries like Iran, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and various other non-state actors are closely monitoring the situation and may seek to exploit any perceived opportunities or respond to perceived provocations. The continued military campaign and the defiant stance of Israel and the U.S. could galvanize opposition movements and increase anti-U.S. and anti-Israel sentiment across the Arab and Muslim world. This heightened tension could manifest in increased proxy activity, cyber attack, or even direct confrontation in other flashpoints across the region. The united front presented by Netanyahu and Rubio, while demonstrating resolve, also carries the inherent risk of further entrenching the conflict and making a broader regional conflagration more likely. The long-term implications of these military and diplomatic decisions on regional stability and the prospect for a lasting peace are profound and deeply concerning to many international observers and actors. The video capturing the bold stance taken by Israel and the U.S. serve as a powerful symbol of their joint determination. In an era dominated by instantaneous global communication, such visual representations are crucial for conveying political resolve and shaping public opinion, both domestically and internationally. The footage likely showed both leaders speaking with conviction, reinforcing their commitment to a shared strategy despite the mounting external pressure. For their supporters, the video would represent strong leadership and an unwavering defense of national interests. For critics, it would underscore perceived disregard for international law and humanitarian concerns. The very act of jointly appearing and making such declaration in the face of global outrage is a calculated move to project an image of unity and strength, emphasizing that their alliance remained robust and their objective uncompromised. This strategic communication plays a vital role in the ongoing information war surrounding the conflict, attempting to frame the narrative and reinforce their positions amidst a cacophony of voice calling for different outcomes. The optics of such a united front are intended to convey that the U.S. and Israel are fully aligned and will continue to pursue their goals, irrespective of the external condemnation and appeals. Ultimately, the unwavering stance of Netanyahu and Rubio in the face of immense global pressure reflects a deep-seated conviction that their current strategy is not only necessary but also the only viable path to achieving their security objectives. This belief system prioritized the elimination of threats and the protection of national interests above immediate humanitarian considerations or international diplomatic consensus. It highlights a fundamental difference in perspective. While much of the world calls for de-escalation and civilian protection, Israel and the U.S. view the current operations as an essential phase in dismantling a critical security threat. This divergence means that the conflict is likely to continue with all its tragic consequences for the civilian population of Gaza and its potential for broader regional instability, until these core objectives are perceived to be met, or until an unforeseen development forces a change in strategy. The resolute dismissal of ceasefire calls and the commitment to their state goals suggest that the path forward will continue to be one of sustained military pressure and diplomatic defiance, challenging the international community to find new ways to de-escalate the situation and protect vulnerable population. That's all for me for today. If you like the video presentation and you would like to follow for more, hit that subscribe and like button now. And we will continue to build this show for you. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.